Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a Lightsworn Shaddoll deck profile. So I'm really excited for this one because this deck is absolutely insane, fusing some of the most powerful engines in the entire game into one crazy 60 card deck that is huge. I have to say this deck is probably one of the biggest decks that I have out of all of them, being a 60 card variant without that grass looks greener, which is crazy that it's still banned. I still think that card needs to go back to 1. But without further ado, guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can come part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below because we have some awesome rewards, you guys, like getting your name description for every single video, getting a signed card to the mail, or even getting a quest deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. So without further ado, guys, let's get straight on into this. So first up, we're going to be going through the Lightsworn engine, which is 3 copies of the big bad himself, and that is 3 copies of Judgment Dragon. Yes, you got to play 3 copies of Judgment Dragon. What this card does is if you have 4 more Lightsworns in your graveyard with different names, you can instantly special summon this card from your hand. Then you can pay 1,000 life points as many times as you want to per turn to destroy all other cards on the field, which is amazing. And then once per turn during the end phase, you send the top 4 cards of your deck to the graveyard. This card is free real estate and is just an overall really good card in the entire deck. We then play 3 copies of Wolf Lightsworn Beast. If this card is sent from the deck to the graveyard, then you get to special summon it, which is a really good effect just to be able to get you an additional monster on your side of the field. 1 copy of Goroth. Goroth is just basically here for a name that each time a card is sent from your deck to the graveyard by the effect of a Lightsworn monster, you can send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard, and then you get to draw a card for each Lightsworn card sent to the graveyard by this effect. But it's basically just here for the name because you don't want to play Jane, you want to play this one over it. We then play 3 copies of Raiden, which is arguably the best Lightsworn in the entire deck, which has the ability that during your main phase you can send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard, and if any are Lightsworns that were sent to the graveyard by this card effect, it gains 200 attack for each one, or it gains 200 attack for the Lightsworns that were sent to the graveyard, and then once returned during your end phase, it sends an additional 2 Lightsworns to the graveyard, and that's not even the best part about this card. It is a level 4 tuner monster. We then play a single copy of Lila. Everybody knows what Lila does. If you switch her to defense position, she pops a spell or trap on the field. And then she also, during the end phase, sends the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. 1 copy of Felice. Felice is kind of like Wolf. If she's sent to the graveyard, you get to special summon her to your side of the field. And then you contribute her, and then you get to target 1 card your opponent controls and destroy it. Then you send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. And then we play 2 copies of Lumina, rounding off the Lightsworn package. Lumina having the ability to discard a card from your hand, and then you get to target a level 4 or lower Lightsworn monster in your graveyard, special summon that target, and then once per turn during your end phase, you send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. So that's it for the Lightsworns. Getting into the Shaddolls, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Wendy. Wendy is fine at 2. You really don't need any more than 2 Wendy. What she does is if she's sent from the deck to the graveyard, well, let's go ahead and do a little quick upkeep thing. All of your Shaddolls are flip effect monsters. So we're going to go over the flip effects and then the sent to graveyard effect. You can only activate either or of the effects per turn. You can't activate the sent to the graveyard effect and the flip effect the same turn. If you have one on the field set and then one's in your graveyard gets sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can't resolve both. That's something very important that you need to keep in mind anytime you're playing Shaddoll. So what Shaddoll Wendy does is basically the same thing for her flip and her send to graveyard effect. She gets to special summon a Shaddoll monster from your deck in face up or face down defense, except if she's sent to the graveyard, you only get to special summon it in face down defense. Or in face down defense. We then play the same copy of Shaddoll Ariel. Shaddoll Ariel, if she's flipped face up, you get to target one of your banished Shaddoll monsters, flip it face up, or then you get to flip it face up or face down, which is pretty cool, or special summon it in face up or face down that's banished, which is pretty cool. I like that effect. And if she's sent to the graveyard, you get to banish 3 cards from the grave. She's basically here for the copy of the Shaddoll Incarnation, because she combos very well with Shaddoll Incarnation to be able to bring back your copies of Construct. We then play 2 copies of Shaddoll Beast. If it's flipped face up, you get to draw 2 and discard 1. If it's sent to the graveyard, you get to draw a card. We then play a single copy of Shaddoll Dragon. If this card is flipped face up, you get to target a card in your opponent controls and return it to the hand. If it's sent to the graveyard, you get to pop a spell or trap. We play 3 copies, of Shaddoll Squamata. Squamata is really, really, really good in this deck because if it's sent to the graveyard, then you get to send an additional Shaddoll monster from your deck to the graveyard, which is usually Beast, which nets you a draw. And if it's flip face up, you get to destroy 1 monster on the field, which is good spot removal. We then play a single copy of Shaddoll Hedgehog. Hedgehog, if it's flip face up, you get to add a Shaddoll spell or trap from your deck to your hand. If it's sent to the graveyard, you get to add a Shaddoll monster from your deck to your hand. We then play a single copy of my favorite Shaddoll, and that is Shaddoll Falco, which has a really neat effect that if it's flipped face up, you get to target a Shaddoll monster in your graveyard and special summon it in face down defense. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, then you get to special summon this card in face down defense position, which then when it's flipped face up, it gets its effect off again. And it's a tuner monster, which is really, really good for the archetype. And it's a very random tuner in here. So that's it for the Shaddolls and the Lightsworns, which is the main two kind of engines. Let's get into the tech monsters and the chaos package, because you're using a light and a dark engine. So you're going to want to focus on using light and dark boss monsters, like, for instance, Chaos Dragon Levenair. Chaos Dragon Levenair is a ridiculously good card in this deck, and it looks fantastic on this camera, I must say. What this card does, this camera still, like, amazes me to this day about how well some of the cards actually look compared to the old camera. It's just crazy to me. So, anyways, Chaos Dragon Levenair. You can banish 3 light or dark monsters from your graveyard, and depending on the amount that you banish, depends on the effects that you get. If you banish 3 lights, then you get to special summon, or you banish only lights to summon this card, you can special summon a monster from the graveyard in defense. If you banish only dark, you shuffle 1 card from your opponent's hand into the deck, and if you banish both light and dark, you get to target 2 cards on the field and destroy them, which is pretty good on a 3k beat stick. We then play 2 copies of Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning. Just an overall really good card. It can attack twice or banish a card on the field, depending on which effect you want to go for. Just by banishing a light and dark monster, it's pretty much the OG boss monster of all decks. We then play 2 copies of the Chaos Creator as well. I feel like 2, and 2 is the best way to actually play this, because the Chaos Creator has a really neat effect that lets you banish a light or a dark monster from your, or light and a dark monster from your graveyard, special summon this card, and if this card is special summoned from your hand, you can target 3 of your banished cards with different names and special summon 1 of them, place the rest on the bottom of the deck, which is pretty good to be able to just kind of recycle your cards that are banished. We then play 2 copies of Chaos Valkyria. Chaos Valkyria helps out a lot because it is a level 4 monster, and it has the ability to banish a light or dark monster from your graveyard, special summoner to your side of the field, which is the main effect that you're going to want to use for this card. We then play a single copy of the Black Dragon Collapse Serpent and a White Dragon Wyvern Buster, which they search one another when they're removed from the field. Like, for instance, if Wyvern Buster is destroyed, you get to search Collapse Serpent, and if Collapse Serpent gets destroyed, you get to search Wyvern Buster, and you just have to banish a dark or a light monster to special summon these, which is really cool. We then play a single copy of Perform Age Trick Clown that every time it's sent to the graveyard, you get to special summon it back, but you do take 1,000 points of damage, but it's only once per turn. We then play a single copy of Damage Juggler, which you can banish from your graveyard to be able to add a copy of a Perform Age monster from your deck to your hand, which is a pretty good effect to be able to add something like your copy of your Hat Trigger. Hat Trigger, if you control 2 or more monsters, which I guarantee you in this deck you're going to control 2 or more monsters, you can instantly special summon this card from your hand, which is pretty cool to be able to just get you an additional level 4 on your side of the field for Link materials or for Xyz materials. We then play 2 copies of Goblinberg. Goblinberg helps out a lot because you can normal summon this card out on your side of the field. Special summon out a copy, for instance, Raiden, and then use the copy of Raiden to send 2 cards from your deck to the graveyard, or summon out another level 4 to go into Minerva, and then basically you have a really good play where you're getting into Minerva really, really simply. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing quite a few spells in the form of 3 copies of Charge or Solar Recharge. Solar Recharge is probably one of the best, like, instant draw cards in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That a lot of people have kind of forgotten about. Unless you were playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2008, like I was, you haven't played Lightsworns before, you might not know what this card does. What this card does is you discard any Lightsworn, and then you draw 2 cards, and then you send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard. Now, this also fills up your graveyard with potentially 3 Lightsworns, and you get to draw 2 cards, which could be your Judgment Dragons. This card is probably one of the most broken, in my opinion, draw cards in Archetype in the entire game. We then play 3 copies of Charge of the Light Brigade, which lets you add any Lightsworn that's level 4 or lower from your deck to your hand, and then you get to send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, but you do it in reverse. You actually send the top 3 to the graveyard first, and then you get to add the Lightsworn from your deck to your hand, which is still pretty good to be able to add those from deck to hand. We then play 3 copies of Shaddoll Fusion, which if your opponent controls a monster that was special summoned from the extra deck, then you instantly get to fuse using your entire main deck, which is insane. And it summons basically any of your Shaddoll Fusion monsters, which we play 3 different ones in the form of El Shaddoll Constructs, El Shaddoll Winda, and El Shaddoll Apokalon. We then play 3 copies of El Shaddoll Fusion. El Shaddoll Fusion is basically a quick play polymerization. It's a really good card that you do need as a 3 of, and it helps out quite a bit to go into any of your Shaddoll monsters. We then play 3 copies of Chaos Space. Chaos Space is really good because it searches actually Judgment Dragon in this deck, because it has the ability to send a light or a dark monster from your deck to your hand, or your hand to the graveyard, and then you add one light or dark monster from your deck to your hand of the corresponding opposite attribute. So for instance, if I send a light to the graveyard, I must add a dark monster, and if I send a dark monster, I must add a light monster, which is very important for this deck. It also has the ability that when you do that, you have to add a monster that's level 4 or 8 that cannot be normal summoned or set, which is pretty cool. I like that ability to be able to just, it kind of balances the card, to be able to add those cards, to add stuff like your Collapse Serpent, your copies of your Wyvern Buster, Chaos Valkyria, your Levenair, Judgment Dragons, Blackluster Soldier, like those particular boss monsters. This card essentially gives you a gateway to Chaos to get your boss monsters out. No pun, all the pun intended. You know me, all the pun intended. We then play 2 copies of Pot of Avarice. Pot of Avarice lets you recycle your monsters back into your deck, which you play as a 2 of, to be able to send 5 monsters from your graveyard back into your deck and then draw 2. This card is very good at milling through its resources, but there's some instances that you don't want to mill through every single resource, and you hit the wrong card, like all 3 of your Judgment Dragons, and you want to put them back and then get you another chance of drawing them again. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're just going to be playing 2, and that is a single copy of Shaddoll Incarnation and Shaddoll Schism. Basically, this is a Miracle Fusion that lets you banish cards from your graveyard to be able to fusion summon a Shaddoll monster, and then you get to pop a card on your opponent's side of the field that is the attribute of the Shaddoll monster that you just summoned. And Shaddoll Incarnation is basically here for the aerial combo, that you banish this card from the graveyard with a Construct, and then flip your aerial face up, and then you get to revive the copy of Construct, which is pretty cool to be able to just revive your copy of Construct. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 2 copies of El Shaddoll Construct. El Shaddoll Construct is a really good card that basically lets you destroy any monster that's been special summoned without applying damage calculations. This card's ridiculously good. If it's sent to the graveyard, you get to target a Shaddoll spell or trap in your graveyard and add that target to your hand, which all your Shaddoll fusions share that particular ability. And it's just a really good effect overall. And when it's fusion summoned, you get to send any Shaddoll card from your deck to the graveyard, which then will trigger any of their effects. We then play a single copy of Apokalon. Apokalon is really good because it has the ability that if this card is special summoned, you get to target a card on the field, negate its effects, or if this card is sent to the graveyard, you get to add a Shaddoll spell or trap or Shaddoll card from your deck to your or graveyard to your hand, and then you discard a card, which is a really good effect, I might add, but you can only activate either or effect per turn, and it can't be destroyed by battle either. We then play a single copy of Winda. I just feel like you just need these particular fusions. Like, it is focused around summoning the Shaddoll fusions, but I feel like this is the perfect ratio. So what Shaddoll Winda does for this deck is it makes it so either player can only special summon once per turn, and then also this card cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, which is pretty good as well. And if it's sent to the graveyard, you get to add a Shaddoll spell or trap from your deck, from your graveyard to your hand. We then play a single copy of Boral Sword. Yes, we are rocking out that new gold rare one. A single copy of Appaloosa. Got to be playing that gold rare one because it's really pretty. And basically, these are really good counter cards against your opponent because you have the Boral Sword that can help OTK, and then you have the copy of Appaloosa that can help you negate monster effects. And it's really easy to actually go into Appaloosa and get 4 monsters on your side of the field going first. We then play a single copy of the Blackluster Soldier, Soldier of Chaos. Now, if you're going for a little bit more of a budget build, you don't have to play this. You can play a second Winda if you want to play a second Winda, or a third Construct if you want to go that route and get a little bit more bang for your buck when you're actually playing this deck. But I like to play it because I have it, and it's a really good card in this deck. And plus, hey, it's, you know, the Chaos deck. You might as well play the Chaos Soldier. We then play a single copy of Curious, the Lightsworn Dominion. This card's really good because if you link summon in this card using 3 monsters with different with the same attribute but different types, then it has the ability that if this card is link summoned, you get to send 1 card from your deck to the graveyard. And if a card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. And if this card is destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, while it's under its control, you get to target a card in your graveyard and add it back to your hand, which is pretty good just to be able to grab any card that you want back out of your graveyard to be able to use for later use. We then play for the last link monster. We play a single copy of Cross Sheep because we do synchro summon, or not synchro summon, but we fusion summon this deck quite a lot to be able to revive back our cards out of the graveyard to go into additional link plays. We play 2 copies of Minerva the Exiled Lightsworn. Minerva's pretty good because it has the ability to detach material from it to send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. Then you draw cards equal to the number of Lightsworns that were sent to the graveyard by this effect. And if this card is destroyed by battle or it leaves the field because it was destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you get to send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. Then you can destroy cards on the field up to the number of Lightsworns sent to the graveyard by this effect, which is pretty good to be able to pop additional cards. We then play a single copy of Chaos Ruler, the Ketematic Magical Dragon. I think that is how you say it. I just call it the Chaos Ruler Dragon. What this card does is if it's synchro summon, you get to excavate the top 5 cards of your deck. And if you do, you get to add 1 excavated light or dark monster from your deck to your hand. Also, you send the remaining cards to the graveyard. And you can banish 1 light and 1 dark monster from your hand and or graveyard, except this card to special summon this card from the graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. So even if it get you Judgment Dragon this card, it can just bring itself back by banishing a light and dark to help you OTK your opponent, which is why I really love this card, and was one of the reasons I actually picked this deck up again to actually profile it. We then play a single copy of Cyframe Lord Omega because it's really easy to rip cards out of our opponent's hand, and a single copy of Draco Berserker of the Txne because giving you additional banish on the field is pretty good, and its attack gain is permanent, that when an opponent's monster activates its effect, you get to banish that monster, and when it attacks an effect monster, then you can send it to the graveyard, and then this card gains the attack equal to that monster's original attack, which is pretty good. And then you play a single copy of Michael the Arc Lightsworn, which lets you banish a card at the cost of 1,000 life points, and also it has the ability that during the end phase you send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, which is pretty good as well. So that's it for the deck, guys. Really fun deck overall. If you guys like Lightsworns, definitely comment down below and I'll give you a heart, because I've been playing Lightsworns ever since they came out in 2008, which has been like 12 years, and it's still a fun deck. It's still a contending deck. It can surprise people, especially with what it can do and how versatile it is with the different engines that you can throw into Lightsworns. Any basically dark engine that you want to throw into Lightsworns, or any engine that works while it's in the graveyard, works with this deck, which is what's really crazy. You can throw Invoked in here, you can throw Shaddolls like I have, you can throw just the Perform Age package in here and make a pure-ish Lightsworn variant. You can throw artifacts in here. It's totally up to you what you play your Lightsworns like, and it's just an overall really fun deck. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can comment bar notifications, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.